It happened at 2:13 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was sitting in the data center at Falwin Financial, knee-deep in the final tests of a new risk auditing protocol when my phone buzzed. A single notification. From Vanessa. I want a divorce. I found someone who actually makes me happy. That was it. No explanation. No discussion. 22 years together, and she ended it with a goddamn text. I just stared at the screen, waiting for my pulse to come back down. Then a second message arrived. I've moved our retirement into my private account. I'll be moving out this weekend. You can keep the house, I don't need it anymore. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I saw the notification disappear. She said she was in Dallas for a marketing conference. I knew the itinerary. I booked the flights. But now I was wondering if she'd ever actually left Charlotte. I'm Ethan Walker. I'm 45. Senior systems architect at Falwin. I designed financial control systems, the kind that banks and hedge funds pay 7 figures for. Quiet guy. Methodical. Boring, Vanessa used to say. But safe. Safe didn't seem to mean anything anymore. I stared at her last message. I found someone who makes me happy. I didn't even care who. Not yet. What hit me wasn't the betrayal, it was the efficiency. Vanessa had prepared this exit like it was a project launch. Scheduled. Scripted. But what she didn't know was that I had prepared too. When I built our household financial tracker, the one I told her was just a budgeting app, I included more than just expense logs. I had embedded live monitoring, transactional pattern tracking, and flags for suspicious activity. It mirrored my enterprise fraud tools. Just scaled down. And the moment she touched those retirement funds, the system lit up like a Christmas tree. She didn't know she just triggered the beginning of her own undoing. I closed her messages and opened the admin console. The game had already started. The thing about betrayal is it's loud, obvious, emotional. But revenge is silent, strategic. By the time Vanessa hit transfer on our retirement account, my system was already 3 steps ahead. The program I built flagged the transaction as anomalous, not because of the amount, but because of the timing, IP location, and pattern divergence. Then it automatically froze the funds mid-route. She thought she was clever. She had no idea the money never made it to her private account. She moved $0. All she did was lock herself out of the game. The alert went off while I was reviewing a transaction queue for a client in Zurich. I tapped into the back end, confirmed the transfer flag, then cross-referenced her activity log. She'd been planning this for weeks. Small test transfers. Incremental logins from a VPN endpoint in Dallas, convenient cover for someone pretending to be at a conference. She thought she'd gotten away with it. I sat there for a moment in the dim hum of the server room. Not angry. Just disappointed. 22 years. High school sweethearts. And she ended it with a lie and a stolen password. No confrontation. No confession. Just a clean extraction like I was a liability she was quietly offboarding. But Vanessa didn't understand the system. Not mine. Not the one she married into. I'd built redundancy into every account. Shadow logs. Backups. Freeze protocols. She was locked out of everything by 2:19 p.m. Credit cards. Joint savings. Even the burner account she thought I didn't know about, the one labeled consulting reimbursables, was frozen. She hadn't even noticed the clause I embedded months ago requiring dual authorization for any transfer over $10,000. She always thought I was paranoid. No, Vanessa. I was prepared. I didn't respond to her texts. Didn't call. I just watched the system do what it was designed to do, protect what mattered from internal threats. By 3:02 p.m., my lawyer had a draft of the divorce filing. By 3:30, I'd already started backing up every account she'd ever touched. And by 4 o'clock, the real fun began because that's when I got the alert from her company. She wasn't in Dallas. She'd never even left Charlotte. You don't spend over 2 decades with someone without memorizing their patterns, how they talk, how they lie, how they deflect. Vanessa was always charismatic. Polished. She could light up a boardroom and close deals with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I used to admire that. Thought we were the perfect match, me, the systems guy who kept everything running, and her, the marketing powerhouse who made noise in all the right rooms. We met in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Sophomore year. I fixed her laptop in the school library. She called me Mr. Spreadsheet the first month we dated. I didn't mind. I thought it was cute. We built a life that looked picture perfect on the outside, lake house vacations, matching Roth IRAs, Christmas cards with golden retrievers, and flannel pajamas. But behind that, I now see she was building an exit plan. Little signs started creeping in the last couple of years. The late nights at Beacon Ridge Media. Secretive texting. Sudden interest in financial independence podcasts. I caught her once transferring $600 from our joint account to a personal one. When I asked, she laughed, said it was for a girls' trip to Asheville. Maybe it was. But something in her tone was off. Too casual. Like she was daring me to question it. I didn't push. Because I believed we were still on the same team. She let me manage all our finances. Said she didn't understand that stuff. Truth was, she didn't want visibility, not because she trusted me, but because it kept her hands clean. She'd been rerouting tiny reimbursements through her company card. Submitting duplicate charges. Hiding passive income from some side project she never explained. It wasn't an affair of the heart. This wasn't about love. It was about leverage. Vanessa didn't just want out of the marriage, she wanted to profit from it. Walk away richer. Cleaner. Like a hostile merger with a golden parachute. But she made one mistake. She underestimated the system. And she underestimated me. That email I got from her employer? It wasn't just about her skipping the conference. They'd found inconsistencies in a campaign budget, numbers that didn't line up. They thought maybe I could help. So I started looking closer. Into her company. Into her coworkers. And that's when I found Chase Whitman. Vanessa's someone who makes me happy. Chase Whitman. The first time I saw his name, it was buried inside a Beacon Ridge Media expense report, line item, digital partnership reallocation, authorized. C. Whitman. A subtle redirect of $82,000 into a consulting fund I'd never heard of. I cross-checked the timestamp with my fraud system. Bingo. That same week, Vanessa had made a large consulting deposit into her personal credit union account, a transaction she never mentioned. I dug deeper. Chase wasn't just some side piece. He was Vanessa's co-conspirator. A fellow executive in her department listed as senior strategy officer. From LinkedIn, he looked like the usual type, white teeth, private college, startup dropout turned visionary. But what caught my eye was his signature on multiple transfers involving client retainers. Not refunds. Not payouts. Redirects. Misdirected funds flowing into shell companies with names like Wittrock Creative and Stone and Vale Holdings. The same names I now saw attached to our neighborhood realtor. Vanessa hadn't just left me. She and Chase were planning to flip our house. I reviewed the logs again. She listed the property with a fake third-party agent under a trust account she controlled. Estimated sale price? 40% under market value. Quick sale. All cash. No flags. It wasn't personal. It was business. She had reverse-engineered everything I ever taught her about system exploits. Not to create a better life, but to cut me out of the one we built. That night, I pulled up a backup drive with every Beacon Ridge system interaction she'd ever run from our shared home network. 2 hours in, I found proof of internal files being downloaded, renamed, and passed to a third-party server registered under Whitman's address. They weren't just stealing from me. They were stealing from her company. Millions. By morning, I had the complete chain. And I had a name for the federal investigator who'd helped one of our clients years ago recover stolen capital. His name was Miles Kendrick. And I still had his number. I reached out to Special Agent Miles Kendrick the old-fashioned way, a personal, encrypted email sent from a clean machine I kept for legacy system tests. No client identifiers, no grand claims. Just a quiet subject line, fraud activity, internal source, $2 million plus potential. He called me that same night. Ethan Walker, he said, voice even. Still building those bulletproof tracking systems? Still trying, I replied. But this one wasn't for a client. This was personal. Over the next hour, I laid it out for him, the transfers, the dummy vendors, the real estate laundering, the accounts hidden in Vanessa's and Chase's names. All of it backed by full logs, timestamps, and location matches that my software had been quietly recording in the background. I didn't have to embellish. The truth was damning enough. By the time we hung up, Kendrick was already assigning 2 analysts to pull every digital trail connected to Whitman and Vanessa's business activity. 2 days later, he called back. We're opening an investigation. Vanessa Whitman, formerly Vanessa Walker, is now officially a person of interest. And so is Mr. Chase. That was the moment it became real. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was a criminal case. A conspiracy. A fraud operation large enough to involve federal jurisdiction. Vanessa had crossed a line, and not just the marriage one. She'd laundered company funds into personal real estate trusts, rerouted accounts into off-books entities, and tried to liquidate my home under an assumed buyer profile created by Chase's cousin. The pieces fit too well. Too neatly. Almost like they'd done this before. Kendrick confirmed it. Beacon Ridge is missing about $2.1 million. Most of it scrubbed clean before internal audits. Your data helps complete the timeline. I nodded, staring out at the house I used to think of as ours. They were going to sell it, I said. Lowball it to a buyer who didn't exist, then transfer it through Shellcore and walk with the profit. Ethan, Kendrick said carefully, you realize you've just dismantled a federal-level fraud ring using software you built in your garage. I didn't build it for revenge, I said quietly. I built it because I knew trust alone wasn't enough. He exhaled through the line. Well, it worked. Vanessa didn't know it yet, but the walls were closing in. Vanessa always said I saw the world in code, that I lived too much in the logical and not enough in the emotional. She wasn't wrong. But the thing about code is it doesn't lie. And now neither could she. The morning Kendrick executed the first wave of subpoenas, Vanessa called me. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Then a text. Ethan, I need to talk to you. It's important. The irony almost made me laugh. For someone who vanished with a text, she was suddenly desperate for conversation. I ignored her again. At 2:17 p.m., my fraud system pinged a high-priority alert. Attempted login from an unrecognized device using Vanessa's old admin credentials. She was trying to access our household financial backups, probably to wipe what she thought was stored locally. What she didn't realize was that I'd moved everything to triple redundant cloud storage months ago. Nice try. 2 hours later, I got a call from her attorney, Heather Crowley. Sharp. Vicious. The kind who charges $900 an hour just to breathe. Mr. Walker, she began, we've been informed you're interfering with Ms. Walker's access to jointly owned marital assets, including credit lines and investment accounts. This constitutes potential financial sabotage. I cut her off. Every lockout was automated, triggered by fraud behavior protocols. I didn't interfere. My system did. If you'd like, I can submit the code as evidence. There was a pause on her end. Then she said, we'll be responding in court. Looking forward to it. The truth was Vanessa was already underwater. Every account she touched had been frozen. Her Amex declined in a parking garage. Her Uber account shut down mid-ride. Even her hotel booking, which she had tried to run under a false name, got flagged and canceled. Meanwhile, Kendrick's team was dissecting her Beacon Ridge email archives. Turns out Vanessa and Chase had used burner addresses to discuss fake vendor onboarding. They got cocky. Lazy. One of the domains, ridge-marketing.com, was a registered clone of their company's actual site. A fraud so sloppy even interns could have spotted it if they'd looked close. And now the SEC was involved. By the end of the week, Kendrick called again. We're issuing arrest warrants. Wire fraud. Corporate theft. Conspiracy to defraud. I stared at the phone in silence. She going to jail? There'll be a bail hearing, but the evidence is airtight. This wasn't just marital misconduct, Ethan. She helped steal over $2 million. I didn't feel satisfaction. Not yet. Just cold, steady calm. Let her scream. Let her deny. Let her try to spin this. The system was already done playing. I walked into the Mecklenburg County Courthouse wearing the same gray suit I'd worn to my father's funeral. Fitting, I thought, for the burial of a different kind of trust. Vanessa was already seated at the plaintiff's table, flanked by her high-profile attorney and a junior associate furiously scrolling on an iPad. Her face looked different now. Strained. Eyes slightly sunken. Like the mask had slipped and no one had told her. She didn't even look at me. Good. The hearing was about emergency financial access. Vanessa was trying to unfreeze her assets. Heather Crowley spun her usual narrative, controlling husband, unlawful restrictions, financial abuse. But when the judge asked how she had ended up with nearly $500,000 in undocumented consulting revenue, things turned. I handed over a packet I prepared. 72 pages. Timestamped logs. Authentication trails. Vendor shell IDs. 3 bank accounts in her name tied to Beacon Ridge client payments. Heather tried to object, claimed this was a civil divorce, not a criminal trial. That's when Kendrick entered the courtroom. He handed the judge a sealed folder, nodded once at me, then sat in the gallery. His presence said everything. This wasn't just family court anymore. The judge leaned back, I scanning the pages. Ms. Walker, you're being investigated under federal jurisdiction. Any ruling on financial access is suspended pending outcome of that case. All personal and joint assets remain frozen until further notice. Vanessa turned pale. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering fast. Vanessa just stared ahead like her brain had finally caught up to the truth. This wasn't a slap on the wrist. This was collapse. After the hearing, I walked past her without a word. She turned slightly, lips parting like she wanted to say something. I didn't stop. There was nothing left to say. The next day, Chase Whitman was arrested leaving a massage studio in South Park. Local news caught the footage. Wrinkled khakis, sunglasses on, looking more annoyed than afraid until they cuffed him. That's when his face cracked. Vanessa wasn't far behind. Her arrest came at 6:40 a.m. in her friend Jenna's condo where she'd been staying since the funds ran dry. She cried, screamed according to the neighbors. But they took her in quietly. No drama. Just hard justice. No bail. Too risky, the judge ruled. Too connected. Too deliberate. Her smirk was gone now. Mine hadn't arrived yet. But it was getting closer. A week after her arrest, I got the first letter. Not from her lawyer. From Vanessa herself. It came handwritten, mailed from the detention facility in Rowan County. No return address, just my name and an old P.O. box I'd used during our early days of marriage. I stared at the envelope for a while before opening it. The handwriting was familiar. Careful cursive. The kind she used when writing thank you notes to clients or Christmas cards to my parents before she decided they were beneath her. Inside, she wrote, "Ethan, I don't know how everything got so twisted. I never meant to hurt you. Chase told me we were just moving funds, nothing illegal. I didn't know it was this serious. I was scared, I panicked. I missed the life we had. I miss you." I folded the letter once and slid it into a file folder without reading the rest. 2 days later, a second one arrived. Longer. More desperate. They're saying I could face years. I don't belong here. You know me. Please, if you talk to the investigators, tell them I was manipulated. That I was lied to. Ethan, please. I don't want my life to end in a cell. I didn't respond. There was nothing accidental about what she did. This wasn't a misunderstanding. She'd known exactly what she was doing, lying, laundering, stealing. And the part that stuck with me the most wasn't the money or the house. It was the text. I found someone who makes me happy. You don't write something like that if you're confused. You write it when you think you've won. I spent the next few weeks watching the case unfold from a distance. Beacon Ridge's board issued a public statement about cooperation with federal authorities. 7 employees were placed on administrative leave. Chase had lawyered up and was already trying to cut a deal. But Vanessa? She was a different story. Emails showed she'd initiated multiple account diversions. She'd lied on compliance audits. Her digital fingerprints were everywhere, and my software had recorded every keystroke. I didn't even have to testify yet. The data was louder than my voice ever needed to be. Still, the letters kept coming. 5. Then 8. I stopped counting after 10. Not once did she apologize for the betrayal. Not once did she ask what she'd done to me, only what I could still do for her. It was always about leverage. But the power had shifted. She could scream. She could beg. But I'd already made my choice. I wasn't saving her. I was saving myself. Her sister called me next. Melanie. The one who used to smile through gritted teeth every time Vanessa told her to get out of the suburbs and find a real man. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year. So when her number popped up on my screen, I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. "Ethan," she said, voice low, cautious. "Can we talk?" I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just listened. "She's losing it," Melanie whispered. "She thinks you're the only one who can fix this. Keep saying you'll come around, that you'll understand eventually." "She's wrong," I said. There was a pause. Then Melanie's voice changed. Less about pity, more about self-preservation. She used our parents' names on one of those shell companies. Had them sign some documents they didn't even read. Now they're being pulled into this mess. IRS flagged their accounts. My mom's retirement is under review. That got my attention. Vanessa hadn't just burned our marriage. She torched everything in arm's reach. The fraud was wider than Kendrick initially realized. 6 companies, 3 forged identities, 2 more hidden trust accounts, 1 registered in my name without my knowledge. It was like she was planning to frame me as a backup plan. That theory wasn't mine. It came from Kendrick himself. "I think she always planned to pin this on you if things went south," he said over coffee one morning. "The way those accounts were constructed, she knew what she was doing. And she knew how to use your systems to her advantage. But she missed one thing." "What's that?" I asked. "You built safeguards even she didn't understand. Your redundancy protocols? They saved you." I nodded silently. Vanessa used to joke that I was paranoid. That I always had to control everything, even the way our bank notifications were worded. I never argued. I let her think I was overcautious. In reality, I was building a minefield she'd eventually step into. And now the consequences were spreading. Chase flipped. Agreed to a full deposition. named her as the originator of the Beacon Ridge siphoning plan. She didn't just betray a marriage. She masterminded corporate theft. The fallout was brutal. Her parents' assets frozen. 2 of her co-workers under formal investigation. Beacon Ridge stock tanking after a leak hit the local news. And me? I was untouched. She built the storm. I'd only coded the weather vane. I didn't plan on attending the trial. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need the closure. I already had it. Still, when Kendrick asked if I'd be willing to testify, I said yes. Not for vengeance. For the record. Because systems only work when they're built on facts, not feelings. The courtroom was full of press that first morning. Financial analysts. Former colleagues from Beacon Ridge. A few former friends who had always smiled a little too wide at Vanessa's parties. She was brought in wearing a slate gray suit. Not orange. Not yet. Her new lawyer, not Heather, whispered constantly like Vanessa was still coaching her own defense. But her eyes found me. And this time, they didn't plead. They calculated. Even now, she thought she could spin this. Charm a jury. Weave a story. But numbers don't care about charm. And neither did Kendrick's evidence folder. Chase had already sung like a bird. He'd handed over the passwords to their offshore accounts, pointed out when they'd first made the plan, right after Beacon Ridge landed its largest client. Vanessa had orchestrated it. Used Chase for access, used me for cover. I took the stand on day 3. I kept it simple. Presented the logs. Explained the flag system. Walked them through the triggers. When Vanessa's lawyer tried to suggest I'd manipulated the data, Kendrick objected. Mr. Walker's code is already in use by 3 Fortune 500 clients for internal compliance. That line of questioning assumes he risked federal prison to frame his ex-wife. Objection sustained. After that, her defense cracked fast. The prosecution unveiled their star witness, Beacon Ridge's CFO. Apparently, he'd been coerced by Vanessa into approving fraudulent invoice structures. Had the emails to prove it. Her voice, her instructions. She looked smaller in her seat by then. Like a person watching the house she built burn down. The irony wasn't lost on me. She thought I was the one who couldn't let go. But she was the one still writing letters. Still plotting. Still pretending this was a misunderstanding and not a collapse of her own making. After my testimony, I walked out of the courthouse alone. No media. No statement. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing my truth was immutable. She tried to hack the system. But I was the system. The trial wrapped faster than I expected. 11 days. 14 witnesses. Over 600 pieces of digital evidence. Vanessa was found guilty on all charges: wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and attempted property laundering. The judge didn't mince words during sentencing. Mrs. Walker, he said, you used your intelligence, your access, and your position to commit a sophisticated, prolonged betrayal not just of your employer, but of your own husband. This wasn't a lapse in judgment. This was a blueprint for theft. 18 years. No parole for the first 10. Chase Whitman got 9, thanks to his cooperation. And Beacon Ridge? They clawed back over $1.3 million thanks to my evidence. They even sent me a thank you letter signed by their CEO and board. But none of that brought peace. That came later. I sold the house. Didn't hesitate. Every room held echoes of deception, her perfume in the carpet, her fake smiles in the photos we'd posed for at Christmas, her spreadsheets of family budgets that were actually money laundering blueprints. I moved to Norfolk, Virginia. Quiet place. Close to the water. Got an offer to teach at Southcrest University Financial Systems Security. It felt fitting. Teach young minds how to build safeguards the world didn't even know it needed yet. I accepted. My new place had no shared closets. No backup toothbrush in the bathroom. No feminine coat hanging by the door. It was mine. Every inch. One evening I got a letter from the prison. Another one. I recognized Vanessa's handwriting immediately. I burned it without opening it. Closure doesn't come from apologies. It comes from truth. And truth had already been served. Cold. Calculated. Complete. She once accused me of being too paranoid, of seeing betrayal where there was none. But she was wrong. Paranoia didn't save me. Preparation did. And I would never apologize for that. It was late spring when I got the email from Southcrest's Dean of Faculty. A request. A group of graduate students wanted to shadow me for a special project, a deep dive into real-world fraud prevention systems. They'd heard whispers about the Walker Protocol from an article Bloomberg ran about the Beacon Ridge scandal. The same article that never mentioned my name directly but painted the picture well enough. I agreed. I sat across from 6 students, all bright, all hungry, all unaware that the man in front of them once slept beside a woman who nearly ruined him financially and professionally. They asked questions, good ones. What made you build a personal fraud system? Did you suspect something was wrong with your marriage? Was the system built for protection or for revenge? That last one made me pause. I looked at the kid who asked it, sharp eyes, like I had 20 years ago, and I told the truth. Neither. It was built because I believe trust is not a plan. It's a feeling. And feelings lie. They scribbled notes. One of them muttered, damn, under her breath. Another nodded slowly, like the words weren't just academic. They were armor. After they left, I stared at my laptop. I thought about what Vanessa would say if she could see me now. Probably that I finally became interesting now that I wasn't hers. But she wasn't the story anymore. I was. And then, like clockwork, karma made its final entrance. A notification popped up on one of my watch list monitors. A flag on an offshore trust Vanessa had failed to disclose during her asset seizure. It had been discovered during a secondary audit, $147,000 tucked away in a Luxembourg account under a fake executive alias. Violation of sentencing terms. New charges. No parole now? At all. I stared at the screen. Not with glee. Not with anger. With finality. Even in prison, she couldn't stop scheming. But her last trick, like the others, had been built on shaky ground. Without me to shield her, to fix things, to look the other way, the collapse was total. She was brilliant. She was calculated. She was also done. And me? I got up, walked to the window of my new home, and watched the tide roll in. No alarms. No alerts. Just peace. I used to think revenge had to be loud, dramatic, like in the movies. Shouting in courtrooms, burning old photos, long speeches that end with someone walking away in slow motion. But that's not how real justice feels. Real justice is quiet. Measured. It doesn't need applause. It just needs to work. 6 months after the trial, I was asked to keynote a financial ethics conference in D.C. I almost said no. I'm not the kind of man who likes stages. I prefer server rooms in silence. But Kendrick was speaking too, and he convinced me. So I stood in front of a crowd of analysts, auditors, and compliance officers. Professionals who spend their lives trying to prevent the kind of betrayal that nearly destroyed mine. I opened with a simple slide. A quote Vanessa once mocked. People fail. Systems don't, if built right. Then I told them my story. Not the headlines, not the trial. The real story. How love can blind you more than greed ever could. How the person you share a bed with might also be building a file against you, or worse, a future without you that you're unknowingly financing. And how paranoia, when focused, becomes preparation. Afterward, a woman from a cybersecurity firm shook my hand and said, that wasn't a keynote. That was a survival manual. She wasn't wrong. I walked off the stage feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won, but because I'd endured. Vanessa is still behind bars. Her last appeal was denied. Chase took a plea deal and now teaches finance to other inmates. The irony writes itself. Beacon Ridge restructured and now uses a modified version of my fraud system under a corporate license. The very tools Vanessa learned from are now the tools that prevent her from ever repeating her crimes. And me? I sleep soundly. Alone. And free. Not bitter. Not broken. Just rebuilt. They say betrayal changes you. They're right. It taught me that loyalty without boundaries is just an invitation to be used. And the next time someone calls me paranoid, I'll just smile and think, you'd be amazed what I can see coming.